Welcome to Sports Guy Talking. I am Dustin Tran, your host, as I am joined by guest Holden Douglas today to talk about the Vikings as they finished the season with a 13-4 record. Despite that, though, they finished the season with a minus 3-point differential. The Vikings on paper seem to be one of the weakest 13-win teams ever. Before I say anything else, though, I want to present you guys with the topic question. So, here it is. Are the Minnesota Vikings frauds?
That's kind of a complex question just because if we're talking Super Bowl, then as a Vikings fan, I would personally say yes, because truthfully speaking, I don't think we're better than the Eagles, Niners, or Cowboys. But if you're talking about like an early round, I think the Vikings shouldn't worry too much in the early round because they are good enough to win a playoff game. But of course, if we're talking for the Super Bowl, I don't think we have enough. We have a very mediocre defense. We have a first-year coach, and our offense, elephant in the room. Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback, not the best quarterback. So the pieces aren't there for a Super Bowl. So in terms of Super Bowl frauds, I would say yes, we are frauds.
I would agree with you, and I'm going to take it a step further. I think it's pretty clear that the Minnesota Vikings are indeed frauds. I mean, you just look at the point differential. You look at the point differential, and it usually tells you what kind of team you usually have. The Minnesota Vikings, they have a negative point differential, which means they're a mediocre football team. I mean, last year they were a mediocre football team, and this year they were a mediocre football team again. But this time they won 13 games because they knew how to come up in the clutch, which credit to them for that. But you also got to remember that, hey, if Kirk Cousins doesn't come through on like 8 or 9 game-winning drives that he performed this year, then the Minnesota Vikings, they're probably not going to be a playoff team. And you also got to remember that the Vikings only won 13 games because their NFC conference is extremely weak. This is one of the worst conferences that I've ever seen in my lifetime, at least the depth of it, because there are not 7 playoff caliber teams in there whatsoever. So when you look at it from that perspective, yes, the Minnesota Vikings are frauds. I'm not saying that they aren't a good team. They're actually a pretty decent team. But as far as them winning 13 games, no, this is not a 13-win team as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I completely agree. Last year, we were a mediocre team, but the main reason why we did so much better is our defense, which was horrid last year, is now mediocre, and our coaching isn't as awful with a new coach instead of Mike Zimmer. So those two steps is the main reason why we went from an 8 to a 13-win team. The roster as a whole, it's a little bit better, but it's not drastically better. It's just one of those years where it's not. We got lucky in some games, and the biggest issue with our team though is when our team doesn't show up, it doesn't show up whatsoever. So we saw against the Cowboys, against the Eagles, against the Packers, is when our team is not clicking, they get wrecked. And that's the thing about the playoffs is teams are decided when their best shows up when their best is needed. That's the reason why people always remember the Super Bowl champs and people forget about the 2011 Packers. And the Vikings, we have the habit that we don't always show up when our best is needed. So us at our best can make noise, but the issue is we don't consistently play our best, or when there's times that we have to play our best, we don't show our best. And that is why I don't see us going that far, just because I think if we're going up against the Niners, I think we're going to crap the bed. If we're going up against anyone like the Eagles, the Cowboys, or a good team deep in the playoffs, I see the Vikings just playing to not their best abilities.
Yeah, I mean, the Minnesota Vikings, even though they're frauds, I do think they will end up winning the playoff game because they do play the Giants in the wild card round. Another team that I believe is fraudulent in the NFC as well. They just won a lot of close games. They're honestly only in the playoffs because the rest of the NFC is so weak. So the Minnesota Vikings, they're lucky on that front that they get to play the Daniel Jones-led Giants team. But when you look at the Minnesota Vikings, I don't really think they're going to be a team that gets past the divisional round, quite frankly, no matter who they play, just because of the fact that their team, quite frankly, isn't good enough to compete with any of the defenses mediocre. The quarterback, well, he seems to have a pretty good year for them, but most of the time he's generally mediocre. Okay, maybe he's above average, but he's not an elite quarterback. I think we can agree with that. And you look at this team is top heavy, quite frankly. You think about Kirk Cousins, you think about Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, TJ Hockenson, Dalvin Cook. Then there's just like everybody else in there. I mean, if those players don't show up, then the Minnesota Vikings, they're not going to even keep games close. So to me, that's a fraudulent team because 13-win teams, they usually have a lot of depth on their teams. You can usually count on their lower level players, the less known contributors, but I can't count on that for the Minnesota Vikings, which to me makes me feel like they're very fraudulent. All right, so we're going to go ahead and wrap this up with this question. All right, so do you believe that the Minnesota Vikings will beat the New York Giants, and what will the score be?
Yes, I see us beating the Giants. I think it's pretty much going to be the repeat as last game. I think the Vikings, they're going to make big plays when necessary. It's either going to be Justin Jefferson or TJ Hockenson who has a big game. And then the Giants just pretty much don't have enough offense to close in the final drive. I think it's going to be somewhat of a repeat of last game. I see the score being 24-20 Vikings.
24-20 Vikings. Okay, I can definitely agree with that. I got the Minnesota Vikings winning this game as well. I'm going to go lower scoring. I'm going to go something along the scores of 20-13. Vikings will hold on to win. I just don't believe in Daniel Jones and the New York Giants being able to score points effectively. So I think it's going to be a low scoring game. And I think the Minnesota Vikings, they're going to get a lot of yards, but they're going to make this closer than it should be. And I think they're going to hold on and win by 7 and advance to the divisional round. But quite frankly, I don't see the Minnesota Vikings getting anywhere further than that. And they can honestly be grateful that they're playing the Giants in the wild card round instead of a team like the Cowboys, because we all know that if they're playing the Cowboys in the wild card round, they are going to get smoked by them.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like that's why I was glad we didn't play Dallas, just because like the Cowboys are the third best team in the NFC and we do not match up well against them. But against the Giants, that's a game we should win. And because the Giants aren't that strong of a team, as a couple of the other NFC teams aren't that strong either. Like the Seahawks, the Bucks. I mean, we're better than those teams. We're not Super Bowl good, but we're not like, oh, we're not deserving of the playoffs bad.
It's just that they seem to have a lot of wins because they're playing in a fraudulent conference. But anyways, though. So yeah, that's our takes on the Minnesota Vikings and whether they're frauds or not. All right, thanks Holden for coming on the show. Make sure you follow his Instagram accounts. He's got 2 of them. They're at Holden_great and at sports.analyze. Make sure you go ahead and follow his Instagram accounts. All right, thanks for being on the show, Holden.
Oh yeah, no problem. Also, I'll shout out. Make sure you follow my YouTube. It's called What's Holding Up.
Okay, go ahead and subscribe to What's Holding Up. You know, he's got an aspiring YouTube channel that's on the rise. He wants to make sure that you guys are going to subscribe and enjoy his content. So make sure you go ahead and do those things. All right, see ya, bro.
Yeah, take care, man.
Yup. Bye. That was Holden Douglas that you guys just heard. So even though that he's a Minnesota Vikings fan, he believes that they are fraudulent. I also tend to agree with him that the Minnesota Vikings are indeed a fraudulent football team. Despite that, though, both of us have the Minnesota Vikings beating the New York Giants in the wild card round. He's got the Vikings winning by the score of 24-20. I got the Vikings winning by the score of 20-13 against the New York Giants in the wild card round. So that's what I got happening. That's what he has happening. So that is why the Minnesota Vikings are frauds, even though they will win a playoff game this season. Remember, go ahead and subscribe to Sports Guy Talking. Like the video and please comment down below. If you guys do that, I may shout you guys out in my Instagram story every Monday. That'll be for the at Dustin S. Tran Instagram account. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at Dustin S. Tran and at Sports Guy Talking. Also, go follow me on Twitter at Dustin S. Tran. Again, go ahead and do those things that I just told you guys to go do. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed the content that was just produced. Peace out. I hope you enjoyed that video. Want more Sports Guy Talking, the home of great sports content? Make sure you click that subscribe button to get the latest from Sports Guy Talking. Go ahead and like the video. Comment down below. Check the description box on the video in order to follow my Instagram and Twitter. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from the YouTube channel, Sports Guy Talking.